Quitting music was the best thing I've ever done in my life. I'm going to try to share my story. I'm going to keep trying to get better at telling it because I think it's important for you and for myself to understand why a professional musician is now a financial planner helping the music industry. And I spent my entire life mastering my craft, which was the saxophone and woodwinds, flute, clarinet, bass clarinet. And I also grew up playing piano and I dabbled a little bit in bassoon just for fun. And my goal in life was to perform professionally. And of course, when we're deciding what we want to do in life, usually we're very young. And so I was in high school and I did music because I was good at it. And so I had other passions that eventually fell to the wayside because for those of you who are in music, you understand that it is all consuming. And that was the case for me as well. In not just in your time and effort, but also your identity, right? So I spent my entire life mastering my craft. I have a master's in jazz studies. In August of 2015 is where everything changed. And I was fresh off playing with a lot of well-known artists. I had recorded on 30 or 40 records at that point, and I was participating in a lot of original projects, and then of course, corporate work and weddings and things like that. Um, a lot of people teach. I did teach a little bit, but I really wanted to just perform and make a living performing. So I did get to that point where I was no longer teaching and I was performing full time. I was achieving what most people dream of doing for their entire life. Um, but what ends up happening, in my experience, is that that dream is nothing like you think it is, just like anything in life. There is a version that we have formulated in our minds of what it will be like, what the lifestyle is like, who you're around, and almost all of those things were not what I expected or wanted in my life. And so in August of 2015, I had just done a tour of the West Coast with a fun Brazilian band. It was awesome. And I came home and my checking account had $67 in it. And for me, up until that point, I was what I thought fairly good at money. I um, had always some savings and cushion, and I was never living paycheck to paycheck. I never used that language. I never felt like that's how I lived my life. Yet here I was, doing everything I wanted to do musically, feeling like I had reached my goal, and yet had nothing to show for it essentially. And at the time, I was living in a pretty rundown home in Dallas, Texas. It was August, so it was over 100 degrees. My rent was 300 a month, so you can kind of get an idea of what kind of place it was. And this was a wake up call. I felt vulnerable, scared. I felt unworthy. It was like all this work I had done led to nothing. Um, I had spent so many years missing friends' weddings and playing at strangers' weddings instead. So there was just a lot of things going on that just my life was just not in alignment, even though I thought it was, right? And so this was basically my financial rock bottom. So it was a wake up call. I remember telling myself in that moment, I never want to feel this way again. And no one else in the music industry should. I don't understand why this is normal in the music industry to struggle financially. Not just musicians, but literally everyone in the music industry, regardless of your income level. We talk a lot about burnout and mental wellness in the music industry. That's sort of finally coming around, but we don't talk about personal finances. And so I started learning everything I could about it to improve my own situation. And then my life changed drastically. Within 18 months of that moment in August of 2015, I increased my income because I improved my mindset around money. I started saving into a retirement account for the first time, and I bought my first property. And so my life changed drastically in a very short amount of time. I thought it was going to take a lot longer. And so I started sharing everything I learned with my music community. And then eventually that curiosity led me to become a certified financial planner. I went and took all this coursework, I paid for it myself. not to become a certified financial planner or to start my own business, but just because I wanted to learn these things and share them with my community. And so I started a podcast, a blog, a newsletter. I started doing speaking engagements, like everything. Um, and what ended up happening is I was still performing professionally and I was a financial planner. And what I learned about myself is that my relationship with music was completely tarnished by making money playing music, which is sad. And a lot of the colleagues I was around, a lot of them are great people. And the conversations we would have just weren't lining up with what I wanted my life to look like. And so I was feeling isolated and I felt like, you hear the quote all the time, you are the average of the five people you hang around. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. I was doing gigs that just didn't make sense. I won't share them right now, but just some wildly inappropriate, labor law, just unfortunate experiences. Even some of the big names, people ask me, "Oh, how was that? That sounds really cool." And in reality, it wasn't cool at all, and it wasn't affording me any kind of lifestyle that I wanted to live long term. Now, that's not to be that doesn't mean that that's not possible. But for me, I knew that money ruined my relationship with money. So I actually quit in February of 2020 playing professionally and gave up everything that I worked for. I mean, my entire life was dedicated to this and I just gave it up. Now, for me, luckily, I had another passion that I was interested in teaching personal finance. And then what I also realized was when you free yourself up and music is not everything and all consuming and your entire identity, the other passions that you have and that you have too start to bubble up. So I started doing woodworking and I started improving my health. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that came to fruition that couldn't when music was just taking over everything. And so it's been a wild process and journey doing this. I've come to realize that some musicians like learning about this stuff, most of them don't. And I ended up starting my own company, Motif Planning, a financial planning firm for the music industry. And I've learned that musicians and artists are really caught up and struggling with money. And so I still do free education and pro bono sessions for those facing financial hardship. But in terms of my business motif planning, it just doesn't seem like that's something that musicians are that interested in um, for many reasons. One of them being that they're taught that you really got to focus on your music business, which is true, but we can't neglect our personal finances. So um, you can lead a horse to water, I guess, right? Is the saying. So I have switched to music executives, but I still teach the music industry personal finance. And one of the things that I will stand on forever is that your personal finances is probably one of the most important factors in your life that will trickle down to every other aspect of your life. And so I'm going to continue to share my story. I'm going to continue. I mean, every day I film a video, I write blogs, newsletters, I create resources. It is my goal is to be annoyingly valuable, like to where you're sick of hearing about all the stuff I'm talking about to the point where you start saying to yourself, I got to get this stuff figured out and I need help. And I'll be here to help you, or I'll help you find someone that can help you. It doesn't really matter if you work with me or not. I'm sick of the current state of the music industry and its participants being financially illiterate. There's too many headlines of people dying without a will, going bankrupt, committing tax fraud. The list goes on. So, this is one of many attempts to share my story and hopefully you resonate with it. I'd love to hear what you think about personal finances in the music industry or your thoughts on the music industry. Whatever you want to share, I'd love to learn more about you. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.